Hello, welcome to Why Not Both. My name is Pam Schaefer, and I'm a musician and therapist in Los Angeles. Why Not Both is all about how our multiple passions inform our identity, and this season we are brought to you by Under the Radar magazine and produced by Laura Studeris. If you like what you hear, please make sure to like us and subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform and come spend time with us on social media. We are at WNB the podcast, and that is both on Instagram and on Twitter. For this week's interview, we got to hang out with Mark Foster of Foster the People and talk all about the creative process as well as a bunch of unintentional surprises because, hey, it's quarantines. I hope you enjoy this week's interview.
I love having conversations with other creative people about creativity because everybody has something like either a tip or their own kind of, weird practice that they share.
Yes.
Because it's one of those things that like when you get stuck, it's horrific.
Yes.
Like it can be like terrifying.
Uh-huh.
And so like, and that's I guess that's like the reason that I'm probably obsessed with the subject, because there's been so many times where I've had like writer's block or have gotten like stuck or trapped or whatever and had to figure out how to dig my way out of like an intangible, psychological, creative warp, like black hole.
Well, welcome to Why Not Both, Mark, where we talk about the terrible zone of creative blocks.
I love it.
It's a terrifying podcast.
It's gonna be like therapy. Right.
That's really funny that you say that because low-key I started this because my other day job is I'm a therapist.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, we can have another hour-long session after we're done with this interview.
Excellent. I was just like, it's like the first minute of the podcast. Jesus.
This would be the greatest way to find my next therapist. Like, I don't know. It started off as a music interview, and I just really liked her vibe.
Yeah, exactly. In the same city, she does Zoom. Oh my God. We got it. New client referrals right here. Oh my God. That is so funny. No, what you said about the nature of creativity, I talked to a lot of people on the podcast and just in general about that because I'm fascinated by it too.
Yeah, I mean it's been an interesting like journey. Years ago, and I've been good about kind of staying in tune with myself now, but at the time I was pushing myself to write. I was obsessively writing songs like every day.
Oh, wow.
And trying to, not finishing songs every day, but at least like putting in like hours every day.
Right, getting something down.
For a period of time. And I kind of went past the point to where I knew I should take a break. And I just kind of continued to do it. And then one day one day I went in and realized I don't know how to make music anymore, and it was like breaking that. I like broke a weird creative bone, and for like a year and a half, this is like right before I started Foster the People, so I mean this is years ago.
Oh wow.
But it was a lesson that I learned that I've like I put in my pocket and I'll carry with me forever. Because for about a year and a half, 2 years, in that period of time, I only wrote like 3 songs.
Wow.
Because it was like the first time that I realized that like writer's block was a real thing, and so that caused me to go into a complete journey of like looking within and looking with like outwardly to other creative people to talk about like what they do when they get writer's block, and like kind of just started to like what is writer, like is this a real thing? And
yeah,
or is this just psychological, because so many people say just sit down and push through it, and I think that that's kind of something that I when I came out of that, there were multiple things that I learned. I think about that during that time of writing, that it's so important to fill up the well. That it like I wasn't living enough life. I was only living in the studio, and there's only so much you can pull from past experiences before you have to fill up the well with new ones.
Yeah, I was actually curious to ask you about what else that you were doing, one, during the time that you were writing, and then two, during the time after, because if you're writing every day for hours and hours, that's exactly what I was wondering. Like when you hit that wall, I was just like, oh, it sounds like your cup was kind of drained, because you've got to go out and live a little bit, or at least observe other people living. Otherwise, you're kind of like in just, it's great to be in your head and in your imagination, but there's no experiences that are informing that.
Mm. Yeah, that was a big part of it. I mean, I was doing nothing else in that period of time. I was like fully like a hermit, like studio rat.
Yep.
And so I think that, that was definitely a part of it. But it was really scary to be like, oh, this can break. And as I started to kind of look inwardly, I started to get a visual picture of my creativity. I really like to think of like creativity as like a small child, that it's like my like 4-year-old self. That's, and like 4-year-olds are kind of like, they're totally in the moment, totally innocent, and like, but can also be like shitheads and like, just like destroy like walls of a place. Like there's no boundaries.
Right.
And so what I've kind of learned is to have this kind of coexistence with this creative kid that lives in a little house inside my heart. And if I create a safe place in order for it to feel like it can play and not be judged and not be criticized, it'll come out to play. And so for me now, like when I come into my studio, and it's so important for me to make my space, like, and if I move into a new studio, it usually takes me 3 or 4 months at least for
settle in.
Good ideas to start coming out, because the energy has to feel right. I've lived in LA too long. I grew up in Cleveland, and I'm talking about the energy to like being right.
It's okay. I'm a native. This is totally
like, this is safe. This is a safe place. Let's burn our stage together and continue this conversation.
I've got some Palo Santo on hand. We're all good.
Oh, beautiful. Good. I have some next to me too. I love Palo Santo. And so it's it's important for me to be able to like close the door and lock it. Or I don't really have to lock it in my house now, but like just to know that it's like this space is is a safe space for that little kid to come out. And then I basically sit down and kind of set the table, like by starting to play music. I'll start to try things, but I don't force anything. And I found that if I push it too hard for too long, which is what I was doing years ago, which is why I stopped wanting to come out to play. It's like if play starts to feel like work, a 4-year-old doesn't want to play anymore. Oh
my God, that's so accurate. I'm like, I remember being that age, and like I loved playing the piano, but then when someone was telling me like how to play the piano, I'd be like, no.
Yeah.
You're like, no, I just want to play what I heard. Like, go away.
They're like, well, that's like, a C minor scale. And if you play this triad, this is how you augment it. You're like, I don't care anymore.
Exactly. You're like,
I just like how it sounded.
I just liked how, yeah, exactly. Like a piano teacher wouldn't take me actually until I was 5 because my hands were so small. And they didn't want me to learn like incorrect fingering patterns on the piano. But of course I did, because I just started playing anyway. I love that you create boundaries for your inner 4-year-old so that your inner 4-year-old is like, sweet, I'm going to come out.
And it's really interesting, because it's the mix between like a 4-year-old child and a cat. Like I also look at it like a cat.
Cats are assholes. I love them.
They're assholes, but why does it feel so good when they trust you and sit on your lap?
Exactly.
Because you earned it.
Exactly.
And it's like, and if you grab a cat when it's on your lap, you're like, if you're like smothering it with love, like I've waited for this for years, and you grab it, it's gonna run away and not come back for like a month.
Exactly. It's gonna stare at you from across the room and maybe like meow yell for snacks, and that's about it.
And like that's also kind of, I think, how this little kid inside of me works, where it's like if I sit down, turn on the studio, start kind of creating a vibe, that's kind of like jingling the cat food. to where I hope it runs into the room and like comes and sits on my lap. But if it sits on my lap, like I acknowledge that it's here, like I'm like, okay, I can feel the vibration, like something good's coming out now, like something's channeling. But if I try to grab it, or if it feels like I'm trying to put it into a box, or I'm trying to like capitalize on its talent, like here we're gonna write this really cool like chorus, like this hook now that like people are gonna love. You know, if it's like privy to any of that kind of stuff, it can leave the room and it might not come back for a week. And so it's like acknowledging the existence of it and being like, and respecting the fact that the spirit's in the room, and then kind of like creating with it for as long as it stays. And then when it's gone, it's gone. And that's cool. It doesn't mean I stop creating. It means I have to put on a different hat, and like the different hats that I put on now is like it'll be like more of a craft, like more of a working class hat, where it's like, okay, the genius, like the spark was vomited out into this thing, and now I have to structure this somehow, and like I can still, you know, so it's. But that took years to like explore and kind of get into like a good rhythm, and it's still not something that I'll ever fully understand, you know, and I don't want to fully understand it. If I fully understood it, I'd probably stop making music. I mean, like that's part of the thing that draws me to this like art form, or to art in general, is that it's constantly, it's full of surprises and depth, you know.
I love that. I love the idea that it's simultaneously a 4-year-old child and a cat, because I'm like, those are both just so wildly appropriate for the nature of creativity. And it sounds like you were, in essence, after the end of that like really hermetic period, you'd kind of freaked out your cat and your 4-year-old kid, and they were both just like, no, I'm having none of this.
Oh no, they were on like they went into like a coming of age movie, like the cat and the 4-year-olds, like Milo and Otis, like walking across the country, doing like a weird Lois and Clark expedition without me.
Yeah, seriously, it was just like they went on their own like private Rumspringa, and you were not invited. Like, and I was curious, like, what did you do during that time? Like because it sounds like you just pushed yourself too hard. I think that there's a lot in at least American culture about the discipline of writing and the discipline of being an artist. And in some ways it sounds like you over-disciplined and had to like course correct.
Yeah, I got really depressed. It was interesting. It happened, that period of time happened like 2 years before I started Foster the People. Mm-hmm. I was a barista at Alcove Cafe in Los Feliz.
What?
Yeah.
Sorry, I say that because I'm just like, but Alcove is great. Also, you were barista there, which also means that I might have done coffee from you, which is hilarious and weird.
Oh, yeah. Oh, totally.
Oh my God.
Sure. I'm sure I've made you a cappuccino.
Did you ever go to the little table in the back that has all the notes?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's so special, isn't it? Like reading through those notes.
Yes.
I love that table. It's so cool.
God. I miss that.
The little chess table.
Yeah. Yes. That was one of my favorite things to do. In whatever era of my life that was, that didn't involve just only staying inside. I would love to get coffee there, and then I would just read through all the notes, and then I'd put them back in exactly the way that I'd found them, by the way, like just to make sure that it was preserved for the next person who discovered the chess table.
That's special. That's cool. So, you know, it was Man, so those next 2 years, I basically it sent me into kind of an existential crisis, to be honest, because a lot of my identity at that point had been, I think, tied up in this. I moved to LA with like a singular goal of pursuing music and
Mhm.
and kind of taking this chance and
Mhm.
not going to college and not having a plan B. And um, at that point, when I went through that, I was like 20. It was like basically 24 and 25 those
Mhm.
years. Um, and I had played for multiple record labels. I'd, been flown out to New York to like, showcase for, Sony and Island Def Jam. And then like the following year, I remember, oh my God, I'll never forget this. Like I got a call. It was my music manager called the restaurant because I was working, called
Mhm.
Alcove, and was like, you need to, like Dr. Dre wants to see you, like
What?
like right now,
I just
like
love the
wants you.
phrase. My music manager called Alco to tell me that Dr. Dre wants to see you.
And I had to go to the GM, who I didn't have like a great relationship with because I was like, a musician that was, I was like kind of a shitty employee, like kind of like always 5 minutes late. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like, and
yeah.
I had to go and be like, I'm like really, I really don't know how to say this, and I'm really sorry, and I can find somebody else to like see if I can cover my shift, but like, is it okay if I leave work right now? Like Dr. Dre really wants to like hear me play, and it's like a big opportunity, like, try it. And he like looked at me and he smiled and he's like, Mark, he's like, I got you. Just please, like,
Oh,
go play music. Go play for Dre.
that's
And
adorable.
so I got into my 93 Camry that my mom gave me that was like had completely just gotten beaten down, was like so weathered, like the
Yes,
windows the windows were like duct taped, like the passenger window is duct taped to the roof because had been broken for like a year or
of
two.
course, of course.
No air conditioning, like just I'm a struggling artist.
Yep.
And I drove up to the studio and played for Dre, and it was amazing, and kind of led to playing for Jimmy Iovine. And long story short, the deal didn't end up happening. They wanted to make a soul record. I was doing kind of weird, kind of glitched out, I guess now what we call indie pop,
Mhm.
and kind of like, and so we clashed in our vision. They pulled the record deal. I walked away again, kind of being like rejected.
Mm.
And anytime something like that happened, like it would take, like, emotionally, it was really hard to like pick myself up
Of
and
course.
like have the gusto to like go again, because and at that point, after that happened, I really went into like just like a lot of soul searching, because I was like, I was in a really dangerous spot as an artist, because the music industry knew who I was
Right.
and they liked it, but nobody wanted to take a chance. And I knew that I could kind of fall into that weird washing machine cycle of being like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
Mark Foster, yeah, we like him. No, great talent, great
Right.
guy, great
Right.
talent.
And then nothing
But
happened.
like, but I'm serving coffee
Yeah.
at a coffee shop. So
Yeah. Yeah.
my plan was, it's basically, as I was like, I ended up breaking up with my manager, who was like a very close friend, and it was very hard, and was like, you know what, I've been in LA now for like 7 years chasing this thing, and I want to go see the world. I want to go do things. And the attitude switch inside was basically led to, I need to build this myself. I can't wait for a record label or somebody else to give a green light. I need to build this from the ground up. And that was kind of like, that led to a total attitude change, and then starting the band, and then we're here now. But those 2 years of the writer's block, and then kind of like following like multiple passes, really, yeah, it was the fire held to the feet that like caused me to do things that I should have been doing the whole time, which was playing live shows on stage with a band, which I was like terrified to do. I didn't want to play live shows. And that was like, I realized that was the thing that you had to do. Like nobody wants to get shocked something that like, people want to feel like they discovered something themselves.
Right. Right. And that's fascinating. You said that when you were talking, you said that it was the stuff that you should have been doing all along. And I found that so interesting that it's almost like you had been almost seeking permission from other people to do that. And I think that a lot of people have that perception about the music industry, that it's like you have to have other people on your team that are then supporting you in like a record deal or things like that to do the music that you want to do. And you're like, no, I realized I needed to just like actually do it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's so odd, that nature of creativity, that then, it's like you're the only person that can give yourself permission, but that sounds like a really cheesy LA Zen cone.
Well, it's really, it's funny because I feel like executives, if you go to them cap in hand, they'll be happy to tell you what they want you to do. They love it. Right. It's like, because they're in this powerful position, and they like to be, anybody in that position, like in a weird way, likes to kind of play God and likes to think of themselves as the next like Merlin, who's going to pick, right? Who's going to like, Nostradamus going to like figure out who's going to be the next Michael Jackson or Beatles, and so if you go to them, they'll have plenty of things to like tell you like how to jump through the hoops they want you to jump through, but at the end of the day, you're not really. It's all a game of cat and mouse. And if you're not running, they don't want to chase you. And so like, it took a long time to realize that they don't want somebody that crosses their T's and dots their I's. They want somebody that's going to be like, they want to discover something on themselves and feel like they can't have it. And cause everybody wants something that they can't have.
Yep.
And that applies to everything. That applies to business. That applies to, relationships. It's like, yeah. And so that's it's weird. People are very simple when you, I don't know. It's like, when you break it down, everybody kind of works in a similar way.
Well, it's so interesting that you were recognized for your talent, but like you said, you hadn't almost kind of like built it in a way. And it also sounds like, tell me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you were doing things more solo. And then after that, after you went off and kind of had your own Rumspringa separate from, the Milo and Otis adventure of your creativity, it sounds like then you came together with a band, which sounds like it made a difference.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the band really, like, there's something about the camaraderie and the energy of sharing a unified vision with other people, and kind of moving towards something. And also the fact to have like 3 other people to focus on a vision and to be able to delegate different things for people to do and use everybody's strengths, and to lean on everybody's strengths, was so important to build something. Because being a solo artist, I mean, it's really hard, because especially when you're at that position, because you are your own financier, which at that point I was funding it through being a barista.
First at Alco.
So at Alco. So like, there's a lot of costs involved with any kind of startup, and even early days with the band, it's like we had to build a web page. Luckily Mark Pontius knew how to like do web design. But we still had to pay for like a domain name. We still had to pay for like a sort of service.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had some early South by Southwest shows that we were going to. It's like, okay, well, that's amazing, but how do we get to Austin? And so like,
where do we stay?
Yeah, where do we stay? And so we like chipped in and rented a 15-passenger van. And, we like made phone calls and found like a friend of a friend that let us crash at his house. But it was like, it was those types of things early on that people don't really think about that, that are hard. And, being a solo artist, no way, it would have been, it's like multiply that by 10 because you're doing multiple jobs yourself. And if you slip on any one of them, it doesn't totally work. It's like, it has to be like a full frontal assault to be able to get in front of people's ears and eyes and be like, hey, like this is the thing that's happening that you should pay attention to.
Yeah. Cause when you're starting out, when you did give yourself permission to actually do it yourself, I think, I don't know, a lot of the listeners seem to be musicians, which is cool from the feedback that I get from people who message me on Instagram. Wow, I sound like a robot being like, when people DM me on Instagram.
All right, come on. Give us your handle. What's the handle? Let's plug the handle.
We're at WNB, the podcast, on both Instagram and on Twitter. But when people chat me up on the interwebs, they do bring up the fact that when you are a musician, especially starting out in today's climate, in a way, we have this image of the record labels being gatekeepers because they were, and in another way now they're not. But that means that then artists are their own record labels, which means that also mysteriously you're a promoter, a graphic designer, a web developer, a mixer, a masterer, and a tour engineer, and like all these things that like you're like, oh, I thought I was just going to write some songs. It's like, no, surprise. You're like, oh my God, I have to learn Photoshop now. And so it spirals into like a million other jobs that you have to do in order to, like you said, like get your music out in front of people and build the kind of thing that even a record label would be interested in.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah. And it's interesting to see the trends of kind of where that's headed too, with everything changing. The music industry has been in flux and changing and evolving, since the early 2000s when like the CD burner, like Napster and all that stuff started. And so it's like, now that streaming has become, really, I think like the money has returned to the music industry in a new way, to where they're flush with cash again, and A&R guys are driving around expensive sports cars like they used to. Now it's like evolving into, why do we need record labels anymore? Yep. What services do they provide? And how many artists now realize the value of owning their masters and retaining their ownership and being like, wait, what? Hang on a second. I can go direct to fan with and I don't have to pay anything. Like I don't have to, I can upload something to Spotify and Apple Music for pretty much for free, right, and like put it out in the world within like a week or however long it takes for them to process it. And it's out there, and there's no distribution, like real distribution costs. There's no hard costs. Like, I mean, labels are still transitioning because they still do make money off of like hard sales and CD sales and, the Targets of the world that and stuff that still sell CDs. If you're lucky enough to get your CD on their shelf, which is a process within itself, but you don't need that anymore, because people are sharing. It's like digital word of mouth is
Right.
the name of the game now, you know, and there's so many artists that I'll hear somebody that I'm like, I've never heard of that person. And then I look it up and they've got over 1 million
Yeah.
followers on whatever, and they've got like millions of monthly listeners on Spotify. And I'm like, oh, they're like massive. I mean, you know, the greatest example, you know, before the weekend kind of blew up was like, I love thinking about like the early days of the weekend that like, you know, he was selling out like 4,000 to 6,000 capacity rooms all over the country or all over North America and maybe Europe. I just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that he was never played on the radio.
Right.
And never had and this is before he crossed over commercially. And then eventually when Abel decided, you know, he was like, okay, I want to press the button now.
Yeah.
He wrote a giant pop record and exploded. But like before that, it was all word of mouth, you know, and sharing digital word of mouth. And so, and he was selling out, he was making a great living. And so, you know, I mean, there's countless examples of that now still. And I think there's going to be more examples of that.
I'm really curious what you think people are going to do in regards to the fact of our current circumstance that's completely changed anything to do with live shows, touring, any of the stuff you're talking about, especially when you're like, well, I was scared to play live with a band. Now it's like, at least for a few years, I don't think anyone's going to be playing live with a band.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I think everybody's kind of scratching their heads and figuring it out. I mean, I think, you know, the one thing about right now, and even before like quarantine happened, is that content is truly king, and bite-sized content. The content keeps getting chopped into smaller and smaller pieces, you know, to where like Quibi and TikTok, and things like that. Like that's how people want to process their information, and so it's like people are flipping through like magazines, digital magazines now, like flip books, like at lightning speed, and just like, you know, I watch my little brothers who are still in high school. Well, one of them just graduated last week, and the other one's a junior. I watch the way that they process content and how they flip through their phone, and it's like 2 thumbs on the phone, multiple, like both going at the same time, like just like literally watching things flipping through videos like 1 second at a time, and they're processing the information so fast. Until they land on something that's interesting to them.
Yep.
And so, you know, in some ways, I think that the artists and creators of content, I think there's going to be a beautiful surplus of creativity that comes out of this. Because I also think creativity within boundary, like creativity functions really well when you put a couple boundaries on it.
It's like keeping your 4-year-old safe. When kids don't have boundaries, that's usually when they act out because they're scared.
Yeah, totally. And so there's going to be a renaissance of like new ways of thinking about things. As far as like live performance goes, I really don't know, but I do think that VR is probably going to explode. The longer this goes on, I imagine that VR is going to be the next kind of. I mean, I've thought that for a few years, like because I just the possibilities when they actually figure out how to make content not
VR,
not look like 8-bit graphics. I mean, it's
yeah.
I mean, and I've seen some amazing things already. That's like pretty cool and smooth. But like once the engines for that start to become where it's the singularity really starts to happen and like the VR experience really starts to feel like real life. Right. I think there's going to be a really interesting things to do in terms of content, in terms of watching a live show and being able to take a live show then or take a pre-recorded live performance and then augmenting it with some kind of digital experience that's like exciting and interesting, and being able to watch a live show from multiple angles being able to make yourself the performer and see what they see or do what they do. Like there's going to be a lot of different things that come out of that, but live music's never going to be replicated or replaced. Just
Right.
like live theater can't be. There's something about I think the community of like sitting in a room full of other people and feeling the energy of the crowd. Like the crowd is
Yes.
50% of a live performance.
Yes,
Like,
that's exactly, you touched on what I was going to ask about, and what I was thinking about when you said that was that part of it is not just the performance itself, but the interaction between the performer and the audience, and that's what's missing. Like not to diss anybody who's been doing live streaming at this time, I think it's amazing, but some of what I miss when I'm watching live streaming is that, like, and that's why I've actually chosen not really to do it, is that if I'm performing, I'm interacting with the people that are around me.
100%. I mean, like Julie and I have been watching this new Jordan like docu-series at home, and it's like interesting that like even like live basketball, like there are games when Michael Jordan like went into it with a certain headspace and the crowd was a certain way and an opposing player on the other team said a certain thing that made him explode for 70 points.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And like not every game is the same. This is the greatest basketball player in the world, but he doesn't do that every game. Like there are certain games that are better than others, and like the external factors have a lot to do with that, And so there's certain shows like a band, even though we're playing the same songs that we've maybe played hundreds of times or thousands of times, one night's going to be better than the next. And like that has to do with the environment and the crowd and like all of those other like intangibles that lead into that live performance. So, and there's something exciting about it. You can feel it. You can feel the tension. When you go to a great live show, you're like, fuck, I don't know why that was so good.
It was so good.
But like, I am so stirred up inside. Like, I want to go home and like write, or I want to go be creative myself because that just inspired me. We're not going to get that through a computer screen. I don't think we ever really will.
Sound just feels so different when you're actually in that space.
Yeah, and there is something about frequencies and like the BPM of our natural, like how our hearts are beating. Like there's a reason why house music works at like between like 120 and 130.
Yep.
BPM, because when your energy's up and you're dancing, that's kind of like
that's
close to around where your heart is beating.
Yeah.
And so there's all those things that are really, really interesting. But listen, if a vaccine isn't found, if this is something that ends up lingering, I think that this is probably already getting worked on right now. I mean, if I had like any kind of a company where I could work on this now, I would be. So I know that there's probably 100 other people doing this, developing masks or like some kind of outerwear that's safety, like protective clothing that is stylish and cool,
right,
and comfortable, to where people are going to like, that could be the next trend in fashion. Like if this becomes our normal life,
right,
there's going to be somebody's going to come out with some kind of an invention that's like the safest way to go out in public and be able to interact with people without worrying about catching something.
I think that would be brilliant, because I have seen so many people out and about in LA wearing their masks as mysterious like chin brassieres, and I am curious where they're going with that.
Chin brass. I know exactly what you're talking about.
You're like, where did you need an instructional guide?
You're like, I don't think it works. Like, unless they have like a gaping open wound on their chin that you didn't see.
Yep. I'm like, I thought that these were self-explanatory, but here we are.
I saw a photo 2 days ago from a friend who was walking, like it was in New York, and it was literally taken this week of like, I don't know, 50 people outside a bar, like drinking and talking like face to face, super close proximity. And they had like masks that were dropped around their necks.
Oh my
Like,
oh God.
this is the most New York thing I've ever seen. Like hey, I don't care about no virus.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
It's fine. Whatever, fuck it.
It's kind of like, I just imagine like the point and then people just cruising by said point. You're like, you were so close.
Yeah.
You almost made it. There was an attempt. Oh my God. Yeah, and I liked what you wrote in your essay about how the previous crises that we've kind of encountered, at least within our lifetime, were human-caused crises. Whereas this is not a human-caused crisis, as much as there are poorly made YouTube documentaries that would argue otherwise. I love when people spin conspiracy theories, because I'm like, have you ever seen people trying to execute a project, even amongst like 3 or 4 people? I was like, has anyone project managed? No one could pull off a conspiracy. Like, have you met people? Like, you think that thousands of people are all going to be on board to do the same thing? I'm like, what? No.
And then keep it secret.
Yes. That makes no sense. Like, people can't even keep it together for like a group presentation. Like, come on. But yeah, I mean, I liked that point though, that not that it was speaking to the idea of human evils, but it was almost like human foibles had kind of brought us together before. Whereas now we're unified by this experience that really is outside of human control. So it's quite different.
Yeah. There's something, when this first happened, you know, and when I wrote that essay, like the feeling that I had was like this solidarity with humanity and like a sense of unity that I hadn't felt in a long time, because it also happened as like the social systems around the world seem to be bubbling at, like, coming to a boil.
Right.
You know, you had like the yellow jacket riots in Paris, like you had like the riots and protests in Hong Kong.
Yep.
You had, you know, the reaction to Bolsonaro in Brazil, and like kind of like his like kind of a lot of nationalist leaders getting either voted in or forced in to office around the world. You know, our own kind of divide in our country.
Right.
And so, and all of that stuff stopped because there was like a greater issue at hand that people needed to work together to figure out, you know? And so there's a beautiful unity,
Yes.
that came out of kind of this situation. And, you know, and I hope that these are things that, like, when this does clear up, and it will, that we don't forget what it's, you know, the things that we're learning right now. And that applies to the environment too. I mean, the environmentalists are going to have incredible data.
Yes.
After this is all done, to prove what they've been trying to say for decades.
Yes.
And it's going to be impossible to look away from it, because, you know, there's just the nature of things. I mean, you gotten to see, I've seen pollution. I've seen maps of kind of like, I've seen early reports of data in certain parts of the world where the ozone, you know, had holes in it, and the holes have like repaired themselves in a very short period of time.
Yeah.
So that's going to be interesting too. This is a chance for growth. That's for sure.
Yes. Yes. And it kind of shows, at least to me, like, kind of when you spoke of the divide, it's almost like now the kind of the divide that I've been seeing is like individualism versus collectivism, which, you know, weirdly actually dovetails back to what you were saying about creativity, about if you're trying to do everything on your own. When you said like being a solo artist, you're like, that's kind of in some ways, not that it's untenable, but that it's extremely challenging and that the odds are a bit against you. Whereas like banding together, literally with a band, helped you. And thinking about that now, it's like, if, you know, it's helping in a way, it's not just altruism to help people around us with this, but it actually helps you. Like it helps you out to help people around you.
Yeah.
Thinking about that in terms of like, if you think of everyone as your bandmate, like everyone does have a different role in this, but being supportive of them means that then other people can be supportive of you.
Well, you know, and I mean, you know, I could talk about this forever. I mean, the really interesting thing to me about this virus is that it's presented the world and it's presented our leaders with an incredible moral dilemma, which is, what's more important? Like what's more important, the economy surviving and like the way that individuals are, you know, everybody has like an overhead, everybody has their monthly needs. I mean, we're right. Humans that need to eat, breathe, sleep, and like, you know, feel safe. Right. And like, with the economy being shut down, like those things are, there are a lot of people. I heard this stat and I might not get it completely right, but it was somewhere around these numbers that 60% of Americans couldn't write a $500 check right now. And like, that is terrifying.
Yeah.
The middle class, there is no middle class anymore. And this is going to wipe out the remaining kind of hanger-ons of the middle class, I think. And you know, it's interesting to me because, you know, I've been changing the way that I think about the divide the last few years. And I've kind of, my own personal conclusion is that in our country, it's not red versus blue or right versus left, but it's rich versus poor. And I think and you know, you're going to see that it's going to be interesting to see what happens because both are equally important. And if the economy doesn't open up and if the government doesn't find a way for people to make a living, I don't know when it'll happen, but it will happen. People will revolt, you know, and we're going to be in a much more dangerous situation than coronavirus. Right. And so as a leader, especially in a democratic system of career politicians who make their money by lobbyists and staying in power, they don't want to lose their constituency. And so there's people that are in, you know, mixed states, you know, like Ohio or Wisconsin or like places where, or states or red states that are saying, open it up, this thing's a hoax, that are having to, you know, they have under an extreme amount of pressure of like, what's the right thing to do here? Do we open it up and roll the dice knowing that people are going to die, right, but also knowing that millions of people need to get back to work to put food on their table? Right. And there's not, I haven't heard a good answer, you know, for that. And so it's a quandary, you know, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. It
definitely, it struck me that you had said about the artistic renaissance, and it struck me also that in some ways we could be within also a political renaissance. It just reminds me a lot of, you know, the transition of the Dark Ages out into the Renaissance. I was just like, oh yeah, it's like we're living in history. Cool. Didn't want to do that. Only had wanted to read about it, but here we are. Complete with a plague.
Yeah. Right.
Like it's a bit heavy-handed. But yeah, it's like in order to support society, sometimes you have to completely redefine what it is.
Well, pain is the touchstone of growth, you know, and there's no way that people that are the scientists and engineers and innovators and people that think outside the box are now all, doesn't matter what field they're in, collectively thinking about this unified goal of, you know, of solving COVID. And so there's going to be a lot of innovation and things that come out of this. There's going to be a lot of beautiful, positive things that come out of this. You know, I remember visiting, we were on tour in Houston and the band we went to NASA, like to their kind of their station down in Houston. Ooh. And got like a tour of it. And we were kind of walking around there showing us one of like the first, I forget which like Apollo it was, but they had like the, you know, the ship there. Mm-hmm. And the astronaut was saying like, you know, the power in your iPhone, like the computer you're holding is like vastly more powerful than the computer that we use to go to the moon. And I remember like, and he was talking about the space and he was so excited and he was talking about all this stuff. And I asked kind of a dickhead question and I felt bad about it, but it was a real question. I didn't, you know, but I felt, I was like, I said, what? Because he was talking about how much money it costs and all this stuff. And I was like, I asked why, like, why did you guys want to go to the moon? Like, or why did you do this? Like, why did you spend, you know, billions and billions of dollars to do this? And he said, well, anytime NASA has tried to do something that was deemed impossible, like going to the moon, and we set our sights on that. In the process of trying to get to the moon, all of these new technologies were invented that impacted our life on Earth.
Oh, wow.
And that was something that was so profound to me. You know, that throughout you set all those brilliant minds on a unified goal, and the residual like effect of that was that like hundreds of other things were figured out in the process that we then used in our personal day-to-day life and help the world run more efficiently. And so I have to believe that, you know, coming out of this, that there's going to be incredible innovation. I'm obviously afraid of all of the digital land grab that is going to be taken too, because undoubtedly there's going to be, this is also carte blanche for new security, new surveillance, data tracking, like all of those things. I mean, the way that travel changed after 9/11. Yep. I'm really afraid that we're going to see that, multiplied coming out of this. Because any time that there's like a fear, something happens around the world where it's like, hey, look over here, this is really scary. The government's like, we're going to slap you with all of these things. Like here's 10 Patriot Acts that we just signed.
I was like, what's beyond patriot? It's nationalism. What you said about, you know, the channeling one's creativity or the collective NASA creativity towards spaceships ended up, you know, then creating so many other technologies. I think that when you said, like, why would you spend money on this, that it almost ties into like, I guess the relationship between money and creativity. It's like you can't necessarily, it's not a linear relationship where it's like you put in $5 and you get $5 of value back. You might put in $5 of value and get like $5,000 of value back, or you might get like negative $20,000 of value back. Like sometimes you don't know. And so tying creativity to commerce seems like it could be kind of dodgy at times because you don't know what you're going to get back out.
Oh my God. I think about this all the time. You're like speaking my language. Can we talk for another 4 hours just on this subject?
We'll have Why Not Both Part 1? Why not both Part 2? Why not both Electric Boogaloo?
I am in.
I don't know where Electric Boogaloo came from, but like that's where we're at now.
I didn't know either, but it sounded pretty. I liked it. I was like, that's a cool lyric.
I would say I try, but really I just don't think before saying things sometimes.
That's the best way. Commerce and art, two things that are completely are beautifully dependent on each other and completely independent of each other. But like there's a symbiotic relationship, like when those things are in balance, that I think is really important for an artist.
Yeah, like you were talking about kind of even like the cost of like starting up as a band and as an artist so people see you. And I think that so many people then are feel invalidated when they have to work another job. Like you were talking about your time at Alcove, that you're like, I was really depressed. I'd come here to be an artist. And it's like, you were still an artist. You were an artist who was also making probably really excellent coffee, so that then other weirdo artists like me could drink that coffee and read notes that are stored in a chess table.
But there was also a symbiotic relationship between even in that when I would get home from the coffee shop and I sat down to like write songs or work on music, it was it felt like a reward as opposed to work.
Ooh.
And so I've found that even recently I've in quarantine I got bit by a bug that I never thought that I would ever get bit by, and that's woodworking. I've been bit by the woodworking and like power tool. I'm literally have been working like outside, like looking at Japanese joinery, reading like all these books on like how to do things. And
wow.
And for me, and it's been this amazing new discovery later in life that like, because when I'm working outside on a project with my hands, with tools and whatever, it's still problem solving and it's still creative, but it's a completely different part of my brain than when I sit down and songwrite. And it's tactile. I'm forced to be present because I don't want to lose a finger. So I have to be there. I'm not looking at my phone. It's like extremely meditative.
Yes.
And then when I get inside, you know, like huffing and puffing and sweat, like all that stuff, the physical nature of like when I get inside and I sit down in my studio, it's a reward. And it feels like, oh, I get to make music now. Like this is my escape. And there's been times when making music has felt like a job. And when that starts to happen, that's like an alarm signal for me that I need to go out and do something that I don't quite enjoy doing, or I can't. If you're lucky, like I have to go take out the trash, or I have to go clean the kitchen, or I have to like do my laundry. I have to do something else that like when I get back to music, I'm like, no, I get to do this. This isn't something that I have to do. It's something that I am like privileged to be able to do right now. And like that perception flip in my brain really makes that 4-year-old want to come out and play. It's like,
yes, that's what I was going to reflect on, is that I was just like, yeah, that makes your 4-year-old want to come out to play instead of telling them how you can augment a C minor chord.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember being scared that learning music theory would actually destroy my ability to enjoy playing music, and it kind of did for a little while, and then it didn't. Then I was able to shove it to the back of my mind again. But it did exactly what you said, where it made it unfun. It became almost like an algebra puzzle instead, which is fun in its own way, but is not fun in the, you know, splatter painting all over the room way.
I mean, it's like, it's not fun to learn another language, but like if you're walking into a Parisian cafe and you speak fluent French and it comes out of you like naturally, as opposed to having to think of what word do I use.
Right.
It's a beautiful thing, right?
Right. Shout out to my French teacher, who I petitioned to take AP Music Theory instead of taking AP French as my language in high school, because my French teacher for French 3 just literally had us watch movies, and she played the hammered dulcimer, which is beautiful.
Oh, that's amazing.
French. So I was like, can I take AP Music Theory instead? And they were like, yeah, as an elective. I was like, no, I mean as my language credit. Like, I want to take it as my language credit for this year. And they were like, what? No one's ever asked that before. And so I think because I just asked such an unusual question, they were like, I guess so.
Oh, I love that you did that. That's so cool.
Thanks. It was a quite accidental, like, rogue move where I was just like, okay, I know I'm not going to learn any French in AP French, and I'm going to bomb the AP as much as I love the hammered dulcimer. It's like, how do I get around this? I was thinking about like controls and how, like, I guess what you were saying, it pinged in my brain that like we need a moderate amount of control and boundaries, but too much control and boundaries curtails us.
Yeah, I mean, artistically, are you saying?
I was thinking artistically, and when you were talking about the idea of having like the tech surveillance.
We are the last Mohicans in a weird sense of like, we are the last generation that has lived kind of like the ancient world. Like we lived before the digital age really exploded. Like I remember not having a cell phone. I remember like not having access, like not being on the internet.
Yep.
I remember when web pages, like the early web pages were like, had like moving GIFs of like palm trees dancing in the background and like neon green text. And I'm like, I'm just trying to like do a report on Abraham Lincoln. Like I don't need like his biography written in neon green, like type, like size 16 fucking like Comic Sans.
I was just gonna say
I mean?
Comic Sans. It was definitely in Comic Sans.
And so in some ways, look, for us, we are going to be like our grandparents being like, I don't like the microwave, like these things are scary and they're going to be scary, as technology like develops but the truth is like, I am scared, not because of the technology. I think that's beautiful, but because I don't trust the people that are in control of it. And, and when you give somebody that much power,
right,
all it takes is the wrong person to be in power to be able to exercise that power. So, which is also the reason why there's a two-party system, because it's very easy to make two choices. It's like you either can have chocolate or vanilla. Like you throw some strawberry in the mix, so people are like, oh God, I don't know. But it's like there's a reason why every Disney movie has very clear good and very clear evil.
Yes.
So little kids can understand who the villain is, and that's what our systems are doing to each other. They're trying to it's when it's black and white, it makes it very easy to give everybody an identity, so everything stays in control.
Right. Yes.
Control. Yeah.
And in a way, it speaks to what you were talking about, even about creativity itself, because when you said like you have like essentially like the muse in the room, that's when all the like wild genius creativity happens. And then afterwards you can edit and kind of, in a way kind of calm down and figure out what happened. But that genius needs boundaries. And in a way it's like, well, when do you let the chaos reign? Like when do you let people see like, what choices they do or don't have? And how strict do those boundaries have to be in order to keep a system functioning? And should a system keep functioning? And what would be the breaking point of a system that then like essentially the creativity muse comes to visit?
Well, I can say that historically, in times like this, artists are incredibly important. And I think that artists are going to help lead us and be prophetic voices through this time, and through however long, not just COVID, but everything else that we're talking about, are important voices, because artists aren't vying for people's votes. They're not they don't have a corporation or a lobby group that is paying them to have a certain view. And essentially it's like they can speak unfiltered and unedited, so it's like there is going to be a renaissance in art. I think we're already in it. And I think as the pressure starts to get cranked down, under pressure, art becomes more beautiful. I mean, the pressure is like putting like the grapes is like crushing the grapes, and the wine that comes out is the art that artists make from those fermented grapes. And so it's going to be exciting on that hand. And hopefully one day we have an artist as president, because I think like somebody like that thinks outside the box and is empathetic to the human condition is something that we're in desperate need of. And the sad thing is that what good artist in the right mind wants to be president?
That's exactly, I was going to say, the people that we like really should have most to lead us are the people that would least enjoy leading us.
Yeah, because real leadership is an act of service, not a power grab. you
Oh,
know, and it's completely altruistic, but I don't know the last time we've had a completely altruistic president, you know, and so
right.
or leader in general. I mean,
Yeah, like I would, you know,
I loved Obama, but like I'm just saying, like the people that are drawn to that position
right.
tend to have, you know, narcissistic tendencies that love power. It's just
Exactly.
a
And
fact.
that's, you know, if artists were in power, like in a way, like as being a female artist, you have to, in a way, sacrifice the fact that you sacrifice your power in some ways, because instead you're perceived as a threat instead of something of value. And
Mm-hmm.
in a way, artists would have to then like sacrifice their own power and their own value in order to become leaders. Like it really would be something that you're like, oh, that would be in a way altruistic because it would be to your own detriment. It would be to collective good, but it would definitely be to your own personal detriment to then become a leader.
Yeah, yeah. It's you know, look, if I've always said like if Tom Hanks, if Tom Hanks decided to throw his hat in the ring and run, he would win.
Right?
You know, if somebody gets to a point in their career where they're like, you know what, I've said what I want to say artistically, and I want to make a difference in another way now. I think that that's what's the person would look like. And the beautiful thing is that like once an artist, always an artist, and like you know you can recognize like when I look at an artist, I don't give them that title based on what they've created. I give that title based on how they think, you know?
Mm.
And so it's like the way that they view the world is what's important. So it's like there could be a secret artist that is, you know, comes in the guise of just like a straight edge, clean cut politician. But the way that they, you know, their philosophies are completely artistic. So
I like that. I feel like that's like, I was just like, huh. Usually I ask guests like, hey, what's your advice for people? And I'm like, all right, secret artist out there, we're counting on you.
we're counting on you. Step up, change the system. And all the kids that just graduated, you know, I am so excited for the millennial and like post-millennial generation to come into an age where they are changing the way that the world works, because I think that their minds are going to completely reshape the system. And from what I've seen, from like the way that the way that they view, empathize with life, the way that they see each other with non-judgment, and just their view on the world and protecting the planet, all of those things. It's going to be amazing when they actually start to take the reins. I think, you know, I think things will change. I do have faith.
I agree. I treasure the times that I get to actually work with teenagers because they're like the teenagers that I wished that millennials could be, because we still actually did, I think, have some belief that like the current system works, whereas teenagers now are just like, no. And I think that that's great. I think that they're on the right track with that. And so I'm like, okay, guys, I'm really excited to see what you come up with next, because you know that this one's broken, right?
Yeah, rip down the Colosseum and build like a beautiful Frank Gehry building in its place. You know,
there you
like,
go. There you go. I'm just like, I've got your water so you stay hydrated. I've got your sunblock. Like I'm here on.
Here's a little shoulder rub. Come on, you can do this.
Exactly. I'm like, millennials are tired, yo, but like you guys got this. We're here for you. Oh, well, Mark, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you.
It's been so great talking to you, Pam. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us for this week's episode of Why Not Both? If you liked what you heard, please make sure to like us and subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform. You can also come hang out with us on social media. We are at WNB the podcast, both on Instagram and Twitter. This season, we are brought to you by Under the Radar. Under the Radar is a nationally distributed print, music, and entertainment magazine and website. You can find them at www.undertheradar.com. www.undertheradarmag.com, and feel free to support them on Patreon. Extra special thanks to our producer, Laura Studeris, who has been absolutely amazing. Thank you again, and I look forward to next week's episode.